Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us. We share the magic and the mystery of the divine as it's moving through us, through our lives, and leading us places that we didn't expect to go, and bringing us into new information and new insights that then turn out to be essential to our growth and our evolution in our own consciousness. And we couldn't have planned this stuff out. You just can't make it up. You cannot make this stuff up. So we just focus on sharing our stories on this show because it's interesting enough, not making it up and just telling the truth about what's happening is just interesting enough. So I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. I love having these conversations because I love the divine. I'm so in awe of the magic of this great spirit, the divine creator, all that is the oneness. It's just so incredible to me. And I made this decision years ago. I said, I'm just going to interface directly with the one. I'm just going to directly interface with God, source, creator, whatever the name, and I'm just going to be direct with it. I wonder what that would be like. That was my inquiry. Well, I'm finding out, and it's pretty cool. It's very amazing. And if you're on that journey too, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're just beginning that journey and you're really, this sounds so interesting and I love these broadcasts, but I don't know how to do that for myself, or, what's the missing link or anything like that. Or you're just kind of like in your journey and you got to that little shallow space where it was like so deep. And then all of a sudden it got shallow again. And you're like, wait a second, I need to open this back up again. Just reach out, come to my website, reach out, book a little informational call, carriehummingbird.com, Kerri, hummingbird.com. And I would love to have a conversation with you about it. And, I definitely understand. I've been on this journey for a little bit now, a little hot minute, and it's pretty awesome. So today's guest is known as the Soul Connector, Mark Porteous. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Carrie.
I'm so glad you're here. So not only is Mark the father of 10-year-old twins, which by itself is incredible, he survived. Look, he's breathing. And a husband of 18 years. That also, congratulations.
Thank you.
He's a joint venture strategist, an affiliate concierge, and the co-founder of Soul Affiliate Alliance. So transformational leaders and inspired influencers hire Mark to reach more people with their message and mission by developing soulful collaborations and alliances so they can leverage their expertise to make greater impact in the world while enjoying more freedom and ease in their own lives. And so the thing that's interesting about Mark, that the reason I'm interviewing him is because as a soul affiliate, he is the connector. So you can see like the conversation that's going to unfold for us is going to be at a very highly soul level. And because the first step of like developing these connections is to connect with your inner being, who you really are. This is your direct connection to your source energy and divine guidance. And that's one of the things that Mark helps you do. And also to connect with your unique soul purpose, why you chose to be here, and how to live your mission. And the third thing is your divine tribe. So like, how do you attract your tribe? How do you find your perfect customers, your dream team, your affiliate, and all of this is at the soul level. So, there's like the ego way of doing things, which once you find the soul way of doing things, the ego way of doing things now feels icky. And so we're shifting consciousness. And so this, just pay attention to this conversation and where it goes and just see how you can apply this information. Because I know many of you out there, you have a soul purpose. You're here for a reason. You found this podcast because that's what I'm all about, is like helping you navigate that experience. And you're in that spot where you're like, you know what? I know who I am now, or I'm starting to know who I am at a deeper level. And I know I have a purpose, and I'm refining that understanding of my purpose now. And I know I need to get activated because now is the time. I need to get out there. So how are you going to do that? Well, you got to find your tribe and you got to refine your message and get aligned. So we're going to talk about that today. So Mark, I know how I got to know all these things, but like, how did you get to know all these things? What's your story look like? How did you wake up to, hey, I'm not just this man in a body with twins? Maybe the twins woke you up. What was it that woke you up?
The twins did wake me up, but it happened when I was 12 years old. That's when I started thinking about having children. It's very unusual for boys to start thinking about that. I became a godfather at 11. Well, I was 11 when my first godson was born. And after that, started thinking about having children. Now, I realize now, looking back, that part of that may have been because my father was a minister until I was 6 years old. And when he divorced my mom, or when my parents divorced, he didn't divorce her, when they divorced, he got kicked out of the church that he had helped to create. And so that started his lifelong quest in questioning Christianity. And he later wrote, his first book was called Jesus Doesn't Live Here Anymore. It was from fundamentalist minister to freedom writer. He wrote he ran the Institute for First Amendment Rights for 15 years. And I share this because, again, it's generational. You know, we pick up from that, where we choose our parents, first of all, for a reason before we're born. And I can look back and see that. But being raised without my father and by my mom and two sisters had a big influence on me. And I always wanted to be a better father than my father was. I didn't want to be an absentee father. And I literally started thinking about parenthood at 12. And it was around that time I was asking my mom lots of questions about spirituality, especially about Christianity, and things that just didn't make sense to me. They conflicted. They didn't sound compassionate. They didn't sound, there's just too much that was in there. And she kept telling me, I don't know all these answers, but just keep asking the questions and the teachers will come. And the first teachers came when I was 39 years old, just before I turned 40, and they were my twins. And they have been my greatest teachers. My wife is also one of those teachers. I met her when she was 19, and I was 28, just before I turned 29. And she came from a very Christian background as well. And to me, I was just very weird. You know, I had all of these weird concepts about spirituality. And so it was intriguing to her, but I knew that she would become one of my greatest teachers as well. And I, again, was looking for somebody who would be a great mom. Not consciously, we got to play and just have fun for 9 years. And then when our twins were born just before I turned 40, I realized that back when I was 21, I read a quote. I was working for Greenpeace at the time, and my girlfriend took me into this Spiral Circle bookstore. It was my first metaphysical bookstore. Even though I'd been studying spirituality for years, I don't remember the word metaphysical before, and you know, being beyond the physical. And so when I read this quote in there, that we are not human beings having spiritual experiences, we're spiritual beings having human experiences, that was really the big shift. That was the conscious, the first aha of saying all of the things that I questioned my mother about made sense under this understanding. So I called my father and said I wanted to write a book, and his first thing he said, well, don't expect to make money writing a book. And I was like, and he'd written 3 by now.
That's true, though, but yeah.
It's absolutely true, but to me,
you got to write a bunch of books and have them out there for a long time. By the way, people, go buy my book, Second Wave. Go ahead.
Well, the purpose of a book is to make the impact. It's to make the introduction, to help somebody, and there has to be a business behind it. And now I understand that and teach that. At 21, I didn't get it, and I don't even think really my father got it. He was in a
You had a message.
business.
He was fiery. He wanted to get out there and share.
Absolutely, yes. And so I went about it by creating a business that could support my passion. Instead of just doing what I wanted to do, I saw a friend of mine who was selling souvenirs, literally hair wraps, string tied to hair with beads at the bottom at Disney. And within his first year and a half, he made his first $1 million, and then was making millions of dollars every year selling hair wraps. And I said, if he can do that, then in 5 years, I can have a business where I'm making millions of dollars. And I literally believe this. After 5 years, I had over 100 employees around the country selling hair wraps, temporary tattoos, name on rice jewelry, like all this. It's called Unique Ventures. My wife was she was doing it part-time. She worked at the geriatrics hospital. So this was like her fun job.
I just have to stop you for a second though, Mark, because this is a pet peeve of mine. Okay. It's a pet peeve. It has been a pet peeve for a long time. Why do people buy stupid crap? They'll totally buy stupid crap. You know what I'm saying? They will buy things like that, and you can make
They'll spend $15 on a temporary tattoo that lasts for a week or two.
Why do they do this? I remember being an artist and trying to figure out, I'd be at arts and craft shows, and I had my art booth set up with this beautiful art. You know, I thought it was beautiful. I created it. A lot of people told me it was really beautiful, but I'd have these beautiful paintings up, and I'd be like, wow, from my heart, nature and beauty, and I want to share about the world and how beautiful it is and all this. And I would be struggling to make any money. But like right next to me was a guy selling like the little golf tees, ridiculous little golf tees, and people were lined up buying him. He banked out every single show. He made so much money off stupid little golf tees. I guess it's like I'm always wanting to be so deep, and the world's like this. They're like, nope, I just want my tattoo. So go ahead. I decided to rant.
No, that's a beautiful rant because it leads into something even more beautiful, which is why do people sell crap? And it is because people buy it. And so for me, why did I spend 5 years selling crap I didn't care about just because I knew that there was an audience for it? And people often do this with their work. They figure, well, what will people pay me for? And how do I do that? Instead of saying, what am I here to do? And then finding out how you can support people so that they will pay you for that. And that was really, it took 5 years to realize that. Well, it took longer than that. After 5 years of realizing the whole purpose of this was to write my book, and I still hadn't. So I said, screw it, I sold my business, went into sales and said, okay, I can make as much money here working far less, with no responsibility. And it became very easy and comfortable. I figured after 2 years, I'd have my book written, and then I could figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I'd be 32 years old. Instead, 9 years later, I still hadn't written a single word in my book, and my wife was pregnant with twins. And when they were born, I realized that I had been doing this now for 10 years. And that 10 years went by so fast. But now I've got 10-year-old twins. It's going to go by much faster. I'm going to be 50, which I am now 50, before I know it. And I did not want to teach my children what I call the deferred lifestyle of putting off what you know you're here to do to follow somebody else's footsteps and to do what they think you should be doing. It made me sick to my stomach to think that that's what I was going to teach my children. And within a year of them being born, by their first birthday, my book was written. By my 41st birthday, my wife had helped me to self-publish through Amazon. And that's when my journey began.
Do you know what's so powerful is that what I see, and this is just my projection, so you can tell me if like, hey, you're way off base, but what I see is your dad, here's your dad, like this minister, he's really passionate about God and all of this, and then he has this big awakening. He's like, wait a second, this is, damn, this is wrong, and then he goes out and he has this big passion and he tears it up, and all the side effects of being a messenger, which is that your family goes, what? And your community goes, what? And everyone's like, oh, and ostracizes you and everything. You go through this big dramatic thing, but you're tapped into something really true, and that's what motivates you to keep going. And then here you are, like seeing that, witnessing that, being on the periphery of that, seeing the fallout, like all the sides of that, and then going, but there's something more true than what I'm doing, like as an adult, and I think that's when your kids come, is when it all crystallizes. Because when you have children, all of a sudden it's like a wake-up call. Okay, no more BS. There's something deeper here. It's more important. What example are you setting? It's like it just starts to really crystallize. At least it did for me, and it looks like it did for you too.
Absolutely. And I think it's a lot easier when you're 40 to be able to all of a sudden grow up than it is when you're forced to grow
overnight.
Up at 20 or 30. Yeah. I got lots of time to play. But that whole time really was a preparation so that now everything I do is for them, and they are my great teachers. And my balance, in fact, the challenge that I've had over the last 10 years as an entrepreneur was, how do I integrate? At first I thought I was balancing my family life and my work life, and there's no such thing as balance. You can't possibly have the same of either. It's integrating, it's weaving them together. My family comes to my events. My daughter is such an entrepreneur. For her 8th Christmas, for Christmas, she asked for an office desk and an office chair.
She wants to be like dad. I understand that, daddy's girl. So my dad was very business oriented too, and so I always looked up to him, and he was rational. He was the rational one of my parents, so I always would call him and ask questions. So what's interesting, okay, I've cut 2 threads I'm really fascinated by. One thread is this, the fact that you didn't lose anything. Like your journey of entrepreneurialism that worked out really well, that made you lots and lots of money selling these little hair wraps. You learned a lot about people during that. And so that, I'm sure, comes into play here. So I would love to hear about that. And then, of course, I want to move into more of the soul conversation and what your balance of spirituality and Christianity is like. So let's or wherever you want. But those are the things I'm interested by.
I love it. So, yeah, there were so many lessons that I learned in that 5 years. Obviously, the biggest takeaway was my wife. I got to meet her in that experience, and she was really just escaping her little town in Ohio when she came here and got to start experiencing life. But the lessons that I learned there were just beginning, and I didn't really even know them until much later. In fact, when I finished my book, I was so excited. I brought it to the Spiral Circle where I first read that quote now 18 years later. And I was so proud to tell her that I was going to quit my corporate job and I was going to go out and I was going to save the world. I was going to share my message with the world. And Beverly looked me in the eyes and said, "Oh dear, you're not ready for that yet. You need that job. That job needs you, and your family needs that job." And I almost cried. I had to hold myself together because I was so disappointed. I was like, what? And literally got to my car. I think I did cry and realized that there's a lot of truth to that. And what the lesson that came from that was that the fastest way for me to get where I wanted to be was to know exactly why I'm exactly where I need to be. And to understand why you're here. And at this point, the Buddha says, if you ever wonder where you're supposed to be, just look at your feet. You're always in the place that you need to be. And so I had to understand that. And so for the next year, I stayed at my corporate job that I was so felt like a soul sucking job. But it had been created enough of a bank account where I could make this corporate leap and it wasn't as painful. But I still thought for the next year, how do I save as much money? How do I start building momentum in the other direction? And so it gave me a lot of lessons to learn. And a year later, I finally made the corporate leap into finding out, what am I supposed to do? And it was from this book where my wife said, okay, you finally got the book written, now what? And she was the one who suggested life coaching. And I looked up life coaching, so what does the average life coach make? And she said, less than $20,000 a year. Well, that's not going to work for a family of four. We're used to making well over six figures. So I said, well, that's not going to work. What else can we do? And she said, well, that's what the average life coach makes, Mark. You've never been an average sales rep. You've always been one of the top 2%. Why do you think you would be an average average life coach? Let's look at what the top life coaches make. And look at Tony Robbins, all these people making millions of dollars. And of course, there's lots of them that were making the six figures. And I said, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And I started looking to coaching, and I saw all these people that were saying, if you just do this template that I do, you're going to make six figures in the first year. And so I bought into that and believed it. And my very first coach said, what's your niche going to be? And I said, I wanted to be a spiritual coach. And he literally laughed at me and said, well, you can't do that. You won't make any money. You have to choose either health, wealth, or love. And then you can sneak in spirituality like medicine and the dog food. And so I believed this, and I chose business and money, and I wanted to teach people who had holistic practices, lots of energy workers, different things in the holistic wellness practitioners, to help them to create wealth and business so they could get their work out in the world. But for the first 5 years, I did it in a way where I presented myself as this businessman. I still wore the same suits that I wore from the old job, and I tried to present myself in a way that I thought that was supposed to be business and money. And it was really about shedding that and really becoming the authentic me that I was, and not having to try to make somebody think that I was this, that I knew something that I didn't, or all of that. Just that authenticity became very, very clear. And the idea was, no, I have to lead with soul. I have to start with soul, and the money, the wealth, and the love, all of that stuff comes when you are in alignment with your soul. And I think when you were talking before about there's the ego way and the soul way, that's what I learned was really doing it the soul way is knowing who you are, knowing how magnificent you are, and being able to connect to that inner guidance and following that inner guidance no matter what. And it wasn't until last June, 2019, that my children bought me Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment and The Untethered Soul. And for anybody who has not read The Untethered Soul, you can get it free on YouTube and listen to the 6-hour book. I highly recommend it. That I owned the book, but I actually listened to it every day while I was working out for a month, and it changed everything. I mean, the idea of making the commitment to yourself that you will only follow your inner guidance. And no matter how crazy it might sound or how unlogical it might sound, if you make that commitment to yourself, you will create so many magical opportunities. That's the ease and the flow. That's where all of the shift happens. When you're doing it from ego, you're always pushing, you're always striving. When you do it from that place of soul alignment, it really is a magical experience.
And it is like, it's not like you just reach this plateau or this place where you just make a switch and okay, that's it. I no longer am worried by my ego. It doesn't bother me anymore.
Right.
It's always there, right? So it's diminished. And, you know, I think as we counter I like to call them patterns of conditioning and mental conditioning and, you know, societal patterns of collective conditioning, we've got to actually liberate ourselves from those things. And that's one of the things we did in my recent liberation series was like all the patterns, like external control, external authority, you know, like get rid of that. That's a lie. That's the old paradigm. That is power over that. We're not doing that anymore. So it's actually like a program that you can deprogram yourself from, right? And release those things like, get out of here. You know, I'm no longer choosing that. And thank you, ancestors, for supporting me and releasing these patterns. So what's interesting is that when you went to get trained on how to be a coach and you're like, well, my heart says spiritual coach. My heart says I want to teach people about this. And your guy's like, oh, you'll never make any money. Well, he's talking from a historical paradigm. He's talking from the old paradigm, yeah, that's moving out. And we haven't totally phased into the new paradigm. We're in that phasing period right now, right? That phasing into where people's priorities are shifting. What's important to people is now shifting. And as people's priorities change from like, I want a cute little hair tie to, gosh, I need some depth, you know, like this shallow life is suffocating me. So we switch into that. Spiritual coaches are going to be in demand. You know, it's going to be a whole different situation than and we're going to make a healthy lifestyle. I don't really feel like it's going to be like, you know, king of the hill kind of thing, because that's not the way it works in this kind of realm. It's not like that, but you get what you need. You get what you need, and you're taken care of, and you thrive, you know, in that way. So what's your thoughts on that? Because that's just my projection. That's what I'm seeing. But what are you seeing?
I absolutely, and you talk about it being kind of a slow, gradual change, and there is some resistance in that. But right now, it's happening much more quickly. You know, with everything that's happening with COVID, people are being able to accelerate that shift. I started to become aware of the shift actually literally in 2011. My wife brought me and another couple. She was pregnant with our twins, and we went to see Wayne Dyer's movie in theaters. It was a limited release in theaters called Wishes Fulfilled. And it was about this shift in a critical mass that we were about to hit, a critical mass of people who 1% of the population becoming conscious of their own evolution would bring the whole rest of the population. My whole body lit up the whole movie. I was just so excited, like, oh my God, this is what I'm here for. And Wayne Dyer has a way of really exciting people and inspiring them. He's known as the godfather of motivation, but he says doesn't really know how to motivate people. He knows how to inspire people. And that's really what he does, because he doesn't give you a call to action. He didn't say, okay, here's what to go do to be part of the shift. And so I went home and I started researching the shift and became part of the Shift Network, and later joined Barbara Marx Hubbard's Agents of Conscious Evolution coaching, where she talked about actually my Beverly, the perspective, the spiral circle, was telling me about 2012, and December 21st, 2012 had been talked about for thousands of years by the Hopi, by all the indigenous. They all had the same date, and it was a 26,000 year calendar. Like, how did all these different people have the same date of when this was going to happen? And so we were preparing for this birth of this new way of being in 2012. And so we were in this program that ended up being much more than a year long, but it was started with 8 weeks. But we were all preparing for this, and then it happened, and there were people that felt the energy, but the earth didn't stop, nothing changed. We're like, wait a minute, that's no outer change. But that was the beginning of the birth. Now we are through the birth canal. This is, you know, now we're full on in the mess of it. And once the birth happens, that's just the beginning. That's when you start. So this isn't a process of, it's like life is a journey, not a destination. The shift is part of the human evolution, part of the joy of this. So the creating the new way of being is right where we're at. We're at the beginning of it. And there's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of great challenges. For us, I really see us doing the inner work as the most important piece, and of really knowing who we are, so that as long as whatever actions we're taking are in alignment with who we're being, then we're living our purpose.
Yeah, as long as our actions are in line with who we're being, that's right. So tapping into that, that's a whole, spirituality is experiential, and a lot of religion is thinking, you know. So how do you reconcile that? Like, let's get that to the Christianity conversation and the spirituality conversation. How do you personally reconcile those energies and those conversations? Because they're different conversations, actually. They're really different conversations. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, first of all, Christianity is a religion, and religions are all made by humans to help us to understand God. And there's a lot of similarities between all the different religions, and that those are kind of the things that I look at. Uh, as far as Christianity, again, there's just so many different perspectives on it, and it's kind of what made me start thinking about my children. Like, I started thinking about my children being Christ-like at 11 years old, and this was the vision that I had of them. Was and part of why I had suppressed it for so long was because and I'm like, who am I to have Christ as my child? And I realized we all are. Every one of us that has children, we're all born Christ-like and just become more human-like, and that we are creating, to me, heaven on earth through Christ consciousness, not through a returning of a person, but it is about us as humanity evolving into being spiritual beings, into being in alignment, and to being able to act from that place. That's what creates heaven on earth.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I've been listening to Paul Selig. That's been my pathway through to learn about this. I don't know if you know his teachings.
No.
He's a conscious channel of Christ consciousness. Um, and he's got like 9 audiobooks now at this point. And one of them, the first one is I am the word, or I am word. And so there's these invocations that you start to speak, to remember who you are, like out of your human crust and your human amnesia and your denial and all of this denial of the Great Spirit in you and all of this. And the thing I love about it is that when I hear the statements, it's like remembering truth. It's like, oh, that's true. Oh, that's right. I know that one. Oh, I know that already. Like it's never like, oh, I have to think about that. I'm not sure that's true. It's always the
Right.
resonance of truth. So I really enjoy it. It's been fun. And I had to overcome some resistance because in my past, my mother grew up in Midwest Texas as Southern Baptist, and my grandmother was very religious, so she was super involved in the church and the whole thing, and like really, engaged in 5 days a week at church. My mom was just like, she saw a lot of hypocrisy because when she was growing up in that paradigm, there was it was a civil rights movement. It was all of the things that you would imagine happening in, Texas. In the oil fields around that time.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom saw a lot of hypocrisy. So she's like, well, I can't believe in any of this because you say this thing, but then you do this thing and I don't believe it. So she was very like no religion. So that's how I was raised. I was raised with this. So when I started listening to Paul Selig, it was like, I was like receiving this new information and also healing my cells, healing my body to receive, like that Christ consciousness is, this is good, that there's an actual thing and this is really good. And it's like there's people that try to do things but they may have shortcomings, but that the teaching is true, like the medicine is true. That was just my experience of like healing from that traumatic thing that my mom went through. To
Mm-hmm.
embrace it.
Yep. And I think you said something earlier too, that idea of the ringing of truth. When you hear truth, you know it, and it is a place that comes from the heart. It really can be justified, but it's just we're so trapped in being in our head and in our egos that for me, I literally spent thousands of dollars figuring out how to use my intuition. I really thought women had intuition, men didn't have it. We had to like really work at it. And what I realized was that we all have it. Men don't listen. We're so stuck in the heads. I didn't know how to tell the difference. And I shouldn't say men or women, but for me, I didn't know how to distinguish the voices in my head from the voices in my heart, or the voices of my soul. So it was really being able to distinguish when things are coming from fear and anxiety, that's that human part. And that when it is coming, when it's a feeling of love and lightness, that's how you know when it's true.
Ooh, yeah, I love that. So you actually learned how to tune into your body and use your body as a gauge of like where you're, what aspect of you you're coming from, your soul self or your human self.
Well, that was something that came afterwards. First, it was literally just being able to distinguish whether that was from my head or from my heart. Then I started out working on it of literally being able to use my body as a tool. Some people use muscle testing, all types of kinesiology. I can make a statement to superconscious mind, and I literally feel pushed forward if it's true, and lifted. I feel forward and lifted. And if it's not, I feel like almost pushed down and back. It's this heaviness, and so I can recognize that, and that's my binary code of just being able to say yes or no to any situation. And one of the things that I teach clients is just a basic starting point, because as you get used to being able to hear the whispers become louder and more clear. And when we hear them and we don't take action on them, they fade and disappear. But when we hear the action, when we hear the whispers or the voices and the guidance, and we take inspired action, again, not only does it lead to magic, but the voices become more clear, so we know exactly what to do. We have less doubt. We can take bigger action, and that's really the basic piece of becoming a soul affiliate. Is you have to connect to who you are first before you show up in service to other people. This healing piece, that you're talking about, taking care of yourself. That the whole psychology thing about the id. We first discover who we are, and we are the center of the universe. And it's important to be the center of the universe, that everything that we do, it is about our reaction to it. It's not about what's going on. Everything around us is about us. And if we look at it that way and see, well, what do I have to learn from this? How can I respond to this in a way that is for my good? Then we can be mature enough to say, well, now I can show up in service. How can I serve others? And that's really the next evolution of man, is seeing, how do we serve, and why am I here?
I love that. And it's also the consciousness of like where how to hold yourself too as you go through that process. Because I think like up until now, like I think about part of my aspect is being a healer, for example. Well, then if I'm in the negative pole of that, then it could be like rescuing. And if I'm rescuing, that means I need a victim and a perpetrator. And so I no longer desire that. So I like, nope, that's not what I'm here doing. Like, no. So what am I, so then it's a realignment of like, well, what am I here doing from a soul perspective? It's like, it's small tweaks, but those little refinements and those little tweaks and understanding, they actually make a huge difference in the energetics. And it's like, what are we creating? What are we creating going forward? It's like a lot of mindfulness about that too. So it does take time. I mean, just speaking from personal experience, it takes a little while to hone in and refine and refine and refine and refine. Like, what you're really here to do, and you could have glimpses or visions of it and have like a knowing of like, okay, this is where it's going, or this is how I serve, or this is, but then to actually refine it with intention is the job, and we need conscious community to do that, which is all about tribe, right?
Absolutely. And yes, it does take a long time. I have clients that have been doing their work and service for 10 and 20 years, and are just now becoming really clear on why all of that work it's been leading up to this point, this time in history of now where their next message is their own next personal evolution. So the idea is that we're never ever done, and we can never get it wrong. We just keep doing it.
That's why you just take the journey.
Yes.
Stop worrying about the destination. I got that card the other day in my new Shaman Oracle deck I got from Alberto. This is, by the way, people, this one is awesome. This is the latest Alberto Villaldo Mystical Shaman Oracle deck. Oh my gosh, I studied with the Four Winds, but that is amazing. I got the Journey card. It's like, just take the journey. Stop worrying about where you're going. Just take the journey. Stop trying to plot it and plan it. That's the ego. The ego
Absolutely.
really wants to control and know what's next and predict it. But like the message I keep getting from my soul is like, every time my ego tries to do that, it's a smaller picture. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a tiny
Can you
picture.
imagine if the fifth grade you wanted to create what your life looked like? Let's use your fifth grade mind to make your vision board. Or do you want to take your present mind to create your vision board? It's so much more than that when you think about the God mind, our big mind, versus who we are to create that vision and what's possible. I love that.
Yeah, it's
But,
like just stop doing the little pictures, just like, and just tune into your soul self. And I know people are like, well, how do you do that? Well, that's what you talk to Mark or me about, if you don't know how to do that. But you just tune into that space, that bigger space, and you let it unfold with trust. And I think like what you're saying is really beautiful, Mark, about like as you hear the whispers and you hear the messages, you hear those, and as you take action on those, that unfolds even more things. That unfolds more things, more messages, more steps. And that's how you get in the journey, is that you keep saying yes to all these little redirections. And some of them are leaps. They're not little. Some of them are like, it's time to jump, it's time to
and some of
go.
those decisions are also saying no, because one of the things is that when you say yes to your divine purpose, it also means saying no to 1,000 other things. So part of that following the guidance thing is not just taking brave actions to say yes, but to stand up for yourself and saying no to relationships that aren't working, and to old behaviors, that you were talking about before, being able to say no. And when you're talking about people may not know how to do it, there's simple things that we can all do. Meditating, I think, is one of the things. Having a consistent practice of meditation, even 15 to 20 minutes a day. But also, you were talking at the very beginning about having this conversation with your divine. And most people have at least heard of the book Conversations with God with Neil Donald Walsh. And my dear friend Deborah Polman always talks about, like, people are so amazed that he had these conversations. Well, we all can have them. And that's his whole point, is that you can have these conversations. So having a journal and being able to literally ask questions of yourself and writing those down, those practices are very simple ways that you can start to have these conversations with your higher self and get that guidance, and have it written down so that when you can go back and look at it in a week or a month or a year from now, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe like all these things I wrote down, and look at what's happened since then. You can see that path, you can connect the dots when you look backward. But it starts with just the practice of just giving yourself time to meditate and be quiet and let the messages come in, and then be able to write down whatever guidance you have, and just trusting that it is the guidance, and you'll get more and more comfortable with it and become easier and easier.
Yeah, and you'll get multiple affirmations on it. Like if you're doubting it or you're not sure, it'll come in through another way. Like you'll get another hit on that, or another, just speaking from experience. I do like the shaman deck, the oracle card decks are helpful too,
Sure.
to get your messages. That's how I do it. I pull cards and I'm like, okay, spirit, tell me now, like what's here, what do I need to know in this moment, and then I'll sit and meditate with the messages and that kind of thing, like you said. But it's a trigger point, it's a trigger for the inquiry or the insight that I need, and it's always helpful. So tell us a little bit about how people can get started with you, and what how do you work with people to get started, and what do you actually help them do?
Well, ideally, most people come to me for to connect to their soul tribe, either to get more clients, to help them build their dream team, and most specifically, people come to me for affiliate programs. We talked earlier about the difference between being an affiliate marketer and a soul affiliate, and that's really the focus that I have, is focusing on creating collaborations that are completely in alignment with who you are at soul level. So that ultimately is how I help people. And I've been doing joint venture strategy and affiliate marketing for the last 10 years. And it really is, again, this distinction that has changed it, of knowing who you are. So while that is the work, if I bring people together who are not in alignment, where somebody might be a guru in the space, everybody's well known, but they are enlightened now and aren't doing the inner work anymore, and then I bring them out to somebody who it might be newer in the field, or not as well known, but has been doing this for a long time and is doing their inner work. When I bring them together, there's a wobble, and that's what happened, like a car that's out of alignment, and so I become responsible for that. So that's really why I've focused on the starting point for anybody, is to know who you are at soul level. And one of my clients, Lynn Taylor, 20 years ago, created something called the Core Values Index Assessment. He's actually the one who created the original voice recognition that's now used for Siri. Dragon was the first software, and he created software that was an algorithm that was much better. And he used the same algorithm style to create the Core Value Index, because of something that also you mentioned earlier around learned behavior. that most tests like DISC or Myers-Briggs teaches you how to take a test based on what the desired outcome is. So if I'm taking a DISC analysis to be a salesperson, I'm going to answer questions differently than if I'm going to be a customer service. I'm going to be more gentle if I'm in a customer service, more diplomatic, where if I'm a salesperson, I want to be more assertive and more following up. And so that you answer differently based on why you're taking the test. The core value index is different, that all the different choices that the 4-word choices seem equal to you, and it's just about which one is the most aligned with you. And it cuts through all of that learned behavior to measure your innate, unchanging core values that Abraham Maslow talked about with the hierarchy of needs. So I really love this assessment, and it's free on my website. You can start there. You get a lot of information for free, with just you'll see your chart and everything. You can do an upgrade for $50 and you get like the detailed numbers and even more. And I do consultations with this. I use this when I help people with their launches. If I'm helping them with building their team to make sure that they have the right people in place. I know that some of my clients use this for relationships when people are coming together, so that they can see how they can, how they will work together, how they will best fit together. Again, Lynn has created this and used it in over 200 multi-million-dollar corporate turnarounds. But for me, the bigger purpose is really about human evolution. He sees this. He sees, in fact, he's helping to weave core values into artificial intelligence. But for me, I see it as human beings being able to really self-actualize. And they do that through contribution. You can use your core value index assessment to help you identify what are your core energies and how to shift instantly in any situation. If you start to feel fear or anxiety, into the energy that is of the highest contribution in that situation. So it's just a really, really powerful tool for self-understanding and to be able to use as a tool day to day to just be able to show up in a more powerful way.
Ooh, I love that. Well, so that's free on your website. It's markporteous.com, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
I'll be putting that on the show notes, everybody, so you can go check that out. And I want to honor Mark's time. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I wanted to let you guys know that you can definitely share this out with anybody that you think would benefit from this, the conversation that we had here today. Appreciate you sharing it, liking, commenting, subscribing on all the ways that it's out there. iTunes, YouTube, my website, soulnectar.show, all the places. And so when you do that, you really help more people to elevate the consciousness, because you connect them with information that might be pivotal for them to actually find their soul purpose and their soul tribe. So sharing this out, it's like very helpful for communicating and spreading the messages and the good vibes out there in the world. So we appreciate you supporting us in that way. And we're going to give kisses. So here's your kisses, everybody. You can join me, Mark, if you want to, but I always love to give people kisses. Soul kisses. Love you people so much. Here comes your kisses. And we'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.